Irtiqa, an archive of voices.
Very unhealthy to have that constant pressure on yourself, or that I have it on myself. So it's take food tech and cook something on a Monday morning. That they have everything sorted and they know what they're doing. You have the capacity to define who you want to be and the way other people see you.
Okay, so
So,
hi Akash,
so
thank you for joining us today.
it's great to be here.
Akash is an Australian student. He's a public speaking champion, a 2024 RISE Global Fellow, and the founder of ChillOut, which is a mindfulness app focused on improving mental health for young people. Alongside his work around youth well being, he aspires to build a creatorpreneur venture which focuses on developing cancer treatments and making a positive difference to medicine, technology, and education. His journey reflects a really interesting intersection of these different fields and ideas. And in today's conversation, we'll learn from him and explore how student well being looks like in the very highly competitive environments today. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So, Kash, my first question to you is the moment we look at your profile, it's extremely impressive, right? So, we just wanted to start off by understanding how, if we go back to the beginning, how did it all start? How did your journey begin? What were you like as a student growing up? And did those things slowly evolve into the work and the opportunities that you're involved in today?
Yeah, well, it's first of all, it's great to be on this. I'd say it probably started, I think, when I was younger in school, that drama and performance was something I was very much into. I was a bit of a theater kid, so I did a lot of acting and different kind of performance type roles in dance, singing. So that was a passion of mine. And then when I transitioned to high school, I sort of found a love of learning. And that's really where I started looking into, well, how can I take skills of communication and knowledge to actually serve and help others? And I guess with my project and Chill Out and where that sort of began, I'd say it was actually very interesting in that Rise was a program that I'd heard about, but at the time I wasn't actually old enough to even participate. And then years later, I suddenly remembered during a holiday break, and then I looked it up, and I was eligible, and I was like, okay, let's do something. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what would help my community and what would be something that actually has impact, not just a resume padding kind of project. So I was like, okay, I think I can build this. And I did. And then I guess I'd say off that came a lot of different other opportunities off that project that allowed me to do many other things, I'd say. So yeah.
Okay, so were you always someone who felt confident expressing yourself, or was that something you slowly developed over time?
I'd say I always enjoyed like theater and the acting side of things, but often I would be very nervous around some kind of impromptu speaking or on the spot. I had to have everything prepared, otherwise, suddenly my nerves would take over. And that really kind of showed, I think, when I started public speaking. So I did competitive public speaking through high school. And my first time doing it was back in seventh grade. And basically, I'd done quite well because it was only a prepared speech. So I had all the time in the world to come up with a speech and I'd basically deliver it like a performance. But then when we got to the next stage, they introduced an impromptu speaking component. So they'd give you an unknown topic and suddenly you have like 15 minutes to write up a speech and deliver it in front of an audience. And I was terrible. Like I had no idea what I was saying. And it was something that I realized I needed to work on, but I really enjoyed speaking. I loved that moment of being able to tell a story and to connect with people. So I was like, this is something I'm going to work on. So I spent 2 years working on it. And I later won that competition 2 years later, which was great. And it's from that that I sort of had that confidence to be able to express myself, I think.
Thank you so much. So, when you look back now, like after everything has happened, which part of your life when you were growing up do you think has shaped you the most or, pushed you the most towards being that self that you are now?
I think what probably shaped me the most was my school environment, I'd say to a decent extent, in that I'd come my high school in Australia. We have like a primary school system, which is like kindergarten to sixth grade, and then seventh to 12th has its own different school. And so the school I went to for high school was academically selective. So they look at academics, and you have to, pass a certain score to get in. And going in, I was very nervous when I entered high school because I was like, oh my God, everyone's going to be so competitive. There's this environment. Maybe the pressure will be too much. There's all these things. Like, what am I doing here? Right. And I think that experience very much shaped me because in those first few weeks, I realized, you know what, everything's actually fine. I just need to remove myself from it and understand that, this isn't the be all or end all. And this is just a journey, and one that's so much better if you learn to enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Akash. So we will build on what you said about like Australian education system. So like I will share what happens in India, and like it is like very often not the obvious one, but the most of like Indian education system is oriented like this only. So like in India, like many students are expected to choose their academic streams quite early, usually around grade 11th, and that is a very hard decision to make. So like early in life. Because that means if somebody is taken their streams, they won't be fully able to explore their interest in various fields, and because of that, a lot of students grow up seeing academics and like personal interest as separate paths rather than interconnected parts of learning. And also, I was reading somewhere that in Australia, students have like often seem to have comparatively more flexibility and interdisciplinary exposure. So I was curious, how would you describe your own experience as a student there? And what do you feel that kind of educational environment gives young people more freedom to genuinely explore different interests and identities before defining their future paths?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. I think the Australian education system, I really appreciate the way it's made, the way it's structured, because yeah, it's a lot less rigid. I still don't really know what I want to study at university, and a lot of my friends don't either. And it's not really one that locks you in to certain paths after school. And basically, especially in high school, it's structured that you spend your first 3 or 4 years with, core subjects in English, geography, history, math, science. But then you have elective courses that really allow you to get a taste test of what interests you. So some people might take food tech and cook something on a Monday morning. Other people might do some sports, right? So I tried a few different things, and that gave me a really good understanding of not necessarily what I wanted to do after school, but what I kind of wanted to study at least initially. So when you hit year 11 and 12 in the Australian system, that's where you pick your subjects. So you can pick basically any course you want. The only course that's compulsory is English. Um, and so that gives you a lot of flexibility. And then when you look at the university degrees in Australia, they have basically prerequisite subjects, but it's usually only one or two. So, for example, if you wanted to take medicine in Australia, you need to take chemistry, but you could pick anything else and it wouldn't really matter. So, right now, I take a course selection of maths extension and then English, chemistry, physics, and I did do biology as an accelerated subject. And with that, I can basically go down any path I want. I've ticked the prerequisites for like 90% of the degrees out there. And one of the other great things is that this system means you don't, like, if you have a passion, you can pick it as a subject and you can score really well on it. And that can help you get into the degree you want, even if it's not related. You could be doing law, but you might have a really strong passion for art. And so selecting art in your final years actually helps you get into that law degree. And it means that you actually build up quite a bit of skill, and that's something you might be able to pursue alongside law when you do take university. And worse comes to worse, if you didn't pick the prerequisite subject for the university, it doesn't actually matter. You can still apply. and you just do this like bridging course about a month or so before the university degree that gives you all the foundational knowledge that would have been that prerequisite subject. So I think that's really good. I think that means you're not stressing so many years earlier about what you want to do, because I mean, you look at the average career, which at least previously would span like decades, and for someone to make that decision at the age of what 16 is quite a tough choice, and it's something that's very constricting. So I think people should take the time to be able to explore something that they're going to spend a lot of their life working on.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to hear about that, especially coming from the background that we are currently. And that's just something really that is very hard to imagine in our context, right? So, just we all have many ideas worth sharing, but speaking doesn't always come easily to all of us, right? At some point, we've all experienced that fear of judgment or a lack of confidence, and overcoming that requires a lot of courage and also guidance, which not everyone, especially in countries like ours, has access to. And because of that, many of us never really explore skills like public speaking or communication. So, how did you first discover your passion for public speaking? And how important do you think it is for young people to develop their voices and overcome that fear of speaking?
Yeah, I think, yeah, communication is very, very critical. And the way I kind of got into it and developed it, that sort of came from having a really strong network and people to support me, which is difficult because it's not available to everyone and it's often hard to find. But for me, at least, I think having people early on, I kind of transitioned from drama to speaking. I like very much did a lot of acting things, and that gave me the skills I needed to then put that into communication. The drama stuff, I don't know, I've always liked it as a kid. So maybe that came from watching stuff, I don't know. But that was always something I really liked. And then with the communication side, I think getting mentors, people who understand how to talk effectively, to be able to guide you. And one of the good things is now, we live in a digital world, right? So it's very easy to find people, even if they're not where you live. You can talk to people online. You can enter meetings with people and ask them, hey, how do you talk? How do you express ideas? What makes you able to connect with people? And so I think that's really good. I know when I first delivered my impromptu speech in that competition I was talking about earlier, when I said a speech that I didn't even know what I was talking about, and I was like, oh, I'm really nervous about this. Afterwards, one of the judges actually went up to it and I was like, hey, I felt very flustered. I didn't really do that well. But thanks for being one of the judges. And then he said, you've got a lot of energy. You have something in you, and I think if you work on it, you can do really well. And he was like, these are the 5 things I think you should really focus on. This is how you prepare for an impromptu speech, and this is how you can succeed in it. And so I was like, okay, I now have an action plan. I can work on it. So having a support network, having people who can point you in the right direction, and they don't actually have to be a judge. They don't have to be an expert. They just have to be a couple steps ahead of you on that path. Just someone who has been in your position, maybe a few moments earlier, can guide you where you're going. And I think that's a really, really powerful and useful thing, and something that helped me, I guess, grow as a communicator and storyteller.
All right, thank you so much, Akash. And I think you're really reflective in the way that you think about your journey and your experiences. And so, do you also think that when you're public speaking, when you're constantly improving yourself and getting access to all these mentors and talking to people, talking in front of people, has that some, like, in what ways has it changed your worldview? Like the world around you, how you see it? How has that changed as you gradually grew into public speaking?
Yeah, I think one of the things I realized is broadly a lot of success can come down to, I guess, 2 like meta skills. I guess one would be learning and the other is communicating. And you sort of realize as you develop communication skills just how crucial it is for people to have good communication, because you can have all the ideas in the world, but what will make people listen to them is that communication aspect. Whether you can get people to empathize with you, get people to understand what you're saying, is so vital if you want them to resonate with you and to back you up, right? So that's something you start to realize as well. And then becoming a good speaker also means it's not just about delivery, it's about content and ideas. So when you become a good public speaker, I feel like a part of it is also being able to see what's happening in the world. So it gives you a more nuanced view on the world, because suddenly your eye is sort of trained to spot these kind of things that are happening and form your own insights on it almost unconsciously. Because I guess when I was preparing for impromptu speaking, one of the things I would do is I'd listen to the news. And as I saw different articles pop up in my mind, there was part of me that was like, okay, what insight can I draw from it? If I was to tell this, how would I want to represent it? How would I want to share this insight with an audience, right? So that skill starts to work in the back of your mind. And that's a really important skill. And that's something that changes the way you perceive the world, because suddenly you're able to critically look at things rather than just passively absorb it. So yeah.
So like as you were mentioning about like public speaking, so I was curious about like for those who cannot like muster up enough courage to like just go in front of many people and start speaking. So what would you say to those students who are scared of like speaking up because they feel that they are being judged for what they are thinking, and also like sometimes they also think like their opinion is not good enough. So what would you say or like to those students?
Yeah, I think that is a really valid concern to have. And I can understand that as well. Because even when I wasn't necessarily panicking when I was speaking, if you talked to me 5 minutes before I was about to speak, I'd be freaking out, right? I'd get very stressed, I'd get anxious. And I think it comes down to two things. If you're wondering about whether people are going to, like, whether you have the right to speak and your point, whether people will judge it or not, whether it's a good thought or not, I think some of that can be met with being prepared. I think if you prepare to a certain extent, it can fill you with some level of that confidence. But obviously, there's still that level of nervousness. You're going up and you're like, should I speak out, whatnot? And again, when you're speaking and you're feeling that nervousness, know that that's what everyone feels, right? From the greatest public speakers to others, right? Everyone feels that level of nervousness. Obviously, you might feel more. And I think actually another interesting point about it is this idea of like a spotlight effect, right? We fear so much that people are going to judge us, but at the end of the day, like 3 hours later, half the people are going to forget. Like no one, we have this tendency to look at ourselves and put this imaginary spotlight, thinking everyone's going to judge me, but half of them are going to be thinking what they're having for lunch that day. Like unfortunately, the reality is people won't actually care as much as you think. And that's both a blessing and a curse. It means when you don't know and you're unconfident, that's what can give you that. Well, at the end of the day, no one's really going to care, right? What's the chances I see these people again? I might as well give them something. But that also gives you like a drive and an urge to make a good story, because if you make a good story, then people will care and you can make them remember, and maybe all of them will remember that night, right? So a mentality of there's nothing to lose, but there's everything to gain, right? At the end of the day, if I just rock up and I say something, sure, people might judge for like 5 minutes, but I'm not consuming enough of their brain space for them to be able to worry about it for the next 3 months, right? On the other hand, I could deliver something really insightful that actually helps them. I think if you speak about, that's another thing. What you speak about is also really important, because if you speak about something you're genuinely passionate about, then there's a point where you realize, like, I have something I want to say to people. And when you want to say it, then there's that drive, and that kind of battles against some of the confidence because you're like, oh, I'm not sure, but I think I can help people if I say this. So then it becomes, okay, well, let's give it a go.
Okay, so I feel like for a very long time, conversation around stress and mental health were like either ignored or was treated as something people should quietly deal on their own. And like even today, so many young people are struggling with these feelings as they don't know where to like express what they are going through or where to seek support. And I think what I found interesting in that is that while many of us notice all these realities, very few people actually take like steps to respond to it or build something around that. So I was curious about your own experience with this. Like, when did you first start noticing all these reality about mental health, and what did that journey from recognizing the issue to creating chill out look like?
Yeah, I think, mental health is a very interesting kind of issue in that, yeah, it's something that affects so many people, and yet it becomes an issue that we never really want to talk about. And it's something that we never really respect and actually support in seeking help for it. Now, in Australia, mental health is a huge issue. I think it's like for Australians, suicide is the leading cause of death for people aged 15 to 44. So it hurts people and it harms people. And 1 in 5 young people struggle with their mental health. And yet it seems to be absent from conversation, from interaction. Schools will have like a well-being team and school counselors, and yet a lot of people feel that sense of shame in reaching out to them, and like a fear of judgment from others, and it's not something that people feel open or comfortable about sharing. And so as a result, it's a problem that I feel often gets neglected or removed from the spotlight. And I think it's something that, especially for young people, is a big issue because we go through the whole school system, which, quite frankly, can be very stressful at times. And I know, especially in India, it can be a lot more stressful actually than it is in Australia, where things are very, very competitive and it's all about the ranks, coaching institutes, everything. You have so much work, and it's like, how am I meant to keep on top of all of this? And another thing as well is, I think, yeah, so a few years ago, I was actually diagnosed with essential hand tremors, which means my hands shake quite naturally. And it was unfortunate, but it meant, for example, when I delivered speeches, everyone was like, when you're holding the cards, why are they shaking? Why are you nervous? And it was something that was also exacerbated by anxiety and nervousness and like heightened emotions. So that was something I myself had to tackle and deal with. So I saw that and I was like, well, what am I going to do about it? So for me to calm down my own nervous energy, something I had tried was meditation. So I'd use different mindfulness and meditation platforms. But my kind of issue with it was I wasn't very motivated, basically. So I would try a tool and then give it a couple days, and then I'd forget, and then a couple weeks would pass, and I just wouldn't really use it. And then I'd try another one that I saw online, and I was like, okay, I'll use that one, and then the same cycle would repeat, and it would go on and on. And then I realized that all these like mindfulness platforms, they're not really designed for young people. They're not really designed for engagement. They're not really designed for building that habit for the people who I would argue need it the most. So at the time, I'd actually been learning a language on Duolingo, and I really appreciated the way Duolingo had a streak system. They had rewards, they had like widgets, they had all these like the cute Duolingo bird, and you'd be like, oh, I want to learn a language every day, and I'd do it on the bus. It'd be great, and I was like, why can't I have that kind of experience with meditation, right? Because that would do two things. That would, one, keep people more engaged and consistent. And the other thing is it would suddenly bring meditation and dealing with mental health, something that becomes more fun, more bright, something that can be put back into the spotlight, and something that people can talk about. And so it's like, okay, well, well, let's build it. So I spent an entire, I guess, summer break working on it. And it was a prototype. It still kind of is a prototype, but I launched it and I got people to use it. And it was really, really awesome to build. And so that was kind of the journey I went from unsure of how to, I guess, help people to building ChillOut.
Okay, like now that you have worked with young people through ChillOut, I wanted to know what you have observed along the way. Like, there's often this conversation that whether young people today are struggling more than before, or whether we are simply becoming more open and more expressive about our emotion and our experiences that may have existed before but are now rarely talking about openly, especially. And like at the same time that you have also said that like growing up today comes with its own set of pressure, like whether it is academics or the social media expectation or the constant comparison. I like so through your work with Chill Out, like what kind of emotional struggle or pressure seems to affect young people the most? Like is there any kind of pattern or changes that like particularly stood out to you that is like making young people stress and all these like making people more emotionally overwhelmed?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question actually. Yeah, one of the things I had built into the Chill Out platform was a feedback system so people could share their ideas and thoughts. And so I did draw away some insights from that. I think with what you were saying about the two kind of sides to the coin, on one hand, it's like increased awareness. And so that's kind of bringing to light more cases of, mental health and issues dealing with it. And on the other side, is it the case of with the rise of social media and like an emerging world in the digital age, is that contributing to it? And I think it's definitely a combination. So I think on one side, it's really good that we have mechanisms to actually support this awareness and bring this into more light. But on the other hand, I think it's pretty evidence based that we're in a generation of like loneliness and disconnect. It's been found that social media is, to be honest, probably disconnecting us more than it's connecting us. And especially as we look at how things are going with AI and whether human connection itself is kind of decreasing. I think there's a point to be made about how the world we live in now is less suited to that level of connection we once had. And so that's not really helping us mentally and psychologically. I think with Chia and what young people especially, what they're finding most pressing in their own mental health, I think kind of varies person to person. But I would say that definitely like what is stereotypically classed as like type A achievers, the high performing, for them, it's often the stress of school life. And I'd say that's something I resonated with a lot. School can be very stressful because in a sense, it's this gateway to your supposed future career. And it's like, well, I need to get this score, I need to get this rank to get this result and get into this career, and then I'm set, basically. And so it's like, well, I'll just delay my gratification for years, basically work, and it'll all pay off, right? And then the hard reality is for some it won't as well. And so then that becomes something that they have to deal with and understanding, oh, I didn't get into the course I wanted to. So are all these years wasted? Like, what does it mean for me? What am I even meant to do with my life now? So I think, unfortunately, the way the education system is designed means that for young people, regardless of where they are in Australia, India, wherever else, school ends up in that period of their life becoming one of the highest contributors to stress by far, just because of the way it's built, such that a single result or a set of results is what will impact what you can get into and what you can do with your life. And especially when you're trying to break out of certain socioeconomic cycles and say, okay, this is the way I can provide for my future family, and I can break out of this socioeconomic level, then it's like, well, I need to try really hard. And there are so many people, I mean, especially in India, huge populations and limited number of spots. And so then people start going to, it becomes, I know in India, they have like integrated school with everything, so it just becomes like chaotic. And then in Australia, there's the whole tutoring industry and how it basically means that it's a broken system, and it's one that causes a lot of stress to people's minds. I think as probably it depends, but I would say like relationships is also something that can be a decent contributor to stress depending on what age and where they're sitting. And it definitely varies person to person, but I would say school is probably one of the biggest stresses.
Yeah, thank you so much for building on what you have already said. That currently there are so many pressures on student, and I think that is amplified when there is that pressure to be the best at everything that you do. When you from a young age you're a high achieving student, or you're labeled as ambitious or someone that has potential, then I think that pressure also amplifies that we are expected to be always extraordinary and have it all figured out when we are also just at such a young age. And for most of us, that endless race becomes very exhausting, like both mentally and physically. So, you yourself are someone who has been involved in competitive and high achieving spaces from such a young age. And how have you personally grown up with that sense of pressure or expectations while you were doing it?
Yeah, I think that's like understanding that school pressure, a lot of people assume that it's disproportionately affecting people, and that they're like, oh well, high achievers are getting good results, what do they have to worry about? It's people who are struggling to get it. But often it's the type A high achiever who experience that increased stress because of all these expectations and pressure that a lot of it actually they've imposed on themselves. I think a lot of very high achieving students can be self motivated, and they kind of create this identity for themselves that ends up trapping them. They're like, well, what if I don't get this result? Suddenly that goes against who I am. All these people are going to be like, what? That person always gets the highest results. What have they done now? And so I think it's hard. It's like very hard to be able to separate yourself from those outcomes, because things happen. There are things that are just out of your control, and it's to some extent very unhealthy to have that constant pressure on yourself, or that I have it on myself. So it's it's very difficult, I'd say, to manage, speaking personally. But I'd say the way I tried to kind of go through it would be, I think, entering high school. I entered an academic selective school. So when I entered, I was very unsure because everyone there was, very high achieving type academics. So I was not really sure where I was going to fit. So I think in that first year, I probably tried the hardest I've tried ever since, simply because I didn't know. I didn't really know where I sat. I wasn't really sure if I was good enough to be there. So I worked very, very hard that year. And then when I got to the end, I was like, wow, I worked really hard and it paid off. I did very well that year. But I realized, in a sense, after doing very well, that like, was it worth it? Because one of the things I found that was quite interesting, at least, was there were studies done at university, and they looked at students who got like a 4.0 GPA versus students who got like a 3.8. And they generally found that students who got 3.8 GPAs actually tended to do better, because they basically, a lot of things in life come down to opportunity cost. You have a limited number of time, resources, and energy, and it's on you how you spend that. And so students with a 3.8 GPA, often the high achieving ones actually became 3.8 kind of GPA students, but they would allocate that 0.2 into internships, building projects, things of impact. And so that's the sort of mentality I started to approach the rest of my high school career. I realized that, okay, maybe I don't have to be the highest performer. Maybe it's actually a better decision to be a high performer, but allocate that like extra energy and resources to things that fuel me. And it ends up like, at the time, I didn't really realize it, but years later, it ended up working really well, because suddenly I have a really good portfolio of things I can show. And in a world where the value of university and degrees itself are in the air for a lot of fields, that ends up actually holding a lot more value than a single result or test score. And so I think still aim for your best and try your hardest, but your best doesn't always actually have to be 100% effort. I don't think you should give your all to everything because you've got to leave some for yourself to grow as a person, for yourself to nurture yourself, and to explore things that fueled you. And so it's really hard on one end to, when you think about all these pressures, you know, family, self, friends, community, the perception of you, but I think it's also in your hands to actually shape the identity you want for yourself. So if you change that identity, I think over time people will learn to accept that. And so maybe changing yourself from being the person who has to get the perfect result to someone who works hard, scores high, but also has a life outside of that is really important. And I know that's actually probably a lot harder in an environment like India because it's very narrow tunneled on an academic result because that's basically the entrance process for university. And so there's not a lot of scope for things outside of that. So a lot of people kind of lock themselves outside of anything but what they need to get into for those few couple of years in which they're working towards that. But understanding that there's so much ahead in life. And so if you build a skill like communication or something that you think will be valuable, that will serve you in all those years, but this test score will only help you get into the next chain of the ladder. And that ladder only continues, right? So I think building lifelong skills and to avoid that kind of pressure and that judgment, trying to reshape who you are to not be something that traps you and makes you feel like I have to hit this. And it's very hard, to be honest. Like I often feel that, oh, I have to get this. Yeah, I need to get that rank. Otherwise, who am I? Like, what is all this work for? And like, I need to get the top result. Otherwise, you know, what will people think of me? But it's hard to manage. But I think, you know, changing how you perceive yourself is a good starting step.
Okay, so as you are like talking about spirit and like courage to like just go forward and do. So like I just wanted to ask, basically it is my personal observation that like social media and achievement culture like sometimes make growth look very smooth and linear, especially when like in your case when you are like high like very high ambitious and have like done so many things in your like past. So but when seeing it in reality, like most of the students experiences confusion, maybe sometimes rejection, insecurity, and like moments where they question themselves. So, what has your own relationship with self doubt or failure look like over these years?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's very much this sort of performative, polished side you see to individuals, especially on the online world, that you don't actually get to understand the full picture. Thankfully for me, I've never actually really been much of a social media user. Even LinkedIn was only like last year. Um, so that helped me a lot in that I didn't have to see that side of the world, which I think forces a lot of people to have these expectations and, oh, this person's doing this, I'm not even here, what am I doing, right? And I think that's probably an unhealthy mindset, but it's one that social media kind of propagates. For me personally, with what I've done, I think there was a lot of uncertainty and definitely a lot of doubt. Um, the predominant project I was working on, ChillOut, was for the Rise Challenge. I didn't think at all I was going to be a contender for it. In fact, I think when they had the finalist stage, I wasn't even at home. I was like out somewhere because I didn't know that was the result stage. At that point, I'd like put it out of my mind. I was like, this is a done thing. But then I found out I was a finalist. I was like, wow. And then I was like, oh, again, finalist to winner. Come on, there's like a very slim chance. And they had like a very long interview as well. And I was like, I don't really know what I said. I don't really know. And then when I found out, I was like, wow. And even one of the benefits of Rise is you attend a summit. And that was held in Oxford. And going there, you got to meet the other Rise Fellows. And there was definitely a lot of imposter syndrome. That quickly broke down because I actually formed really strong friendships and connections with them, and they're some of the most amazing people. But initially, when I stepped in, I was like, "What right do I have to stand here? What have I actually done that's enough?" And so there is a lot of self doubt in the process, and I think a good way of, I guess, tackling that and mitigating that is understanding two things. I think one of those things is understanding that there's so much of life ahead of us, right? Half these people are creating these things for a college app resume that'll disappear in 3 years, right? You have decades ahead of you, and you have the chance to work on something that will be 10 times more impactful because you'll have the time and the effort to actually dedicate to it. So understand that the scope of what you see and like can recognize is limited at this stage by this perception of, oh, getting into this uni, building this resume padding. So like understanding that that's going to impact what you see and what you think is happening. And so understanding that that's what's going to create these like polished performative narratives of achievement. And so being able to distance yourself and go, well, okay, if I'm really committed to a cause, then well, I can spend 20 years after uni working on it and do something incredible with it, right? So I don't have to at 15, have built like some satellite that's gone to NASA. And if not, I'm like doomed to be a failure. Because I think in your mind, understanding that everything to an extent is an opportunity cost, right? These people who have done things have done it at the cost of others, like other aspects of their life, right? So you yourself might go, oh, I haven't built this and other people have been building stuff. Like, how do I handle that? We'll say, well, maybe that's because I invested my time differently. That's because I took the opportunity cost and I placed it into myself. And so I feel like I'm a more confident person. Or maybe it's I put into sports. I've built a more active lifestyle that's going to serve me for those years, right? So understanding that you're not going to see what they've traded out to do that, right? You're never going to see what they've traded out to do that incredible thing. And so being able to go, well, there is an opportunity cost. I've just spent it differently. And being able to look at yourself and go, I'm happy with the way I've spent it. And that comes with, I think, some self-care and a bit of soul-searching perhaps on what it means to be you and why you can then feel that kind of satisfaction of what I have is enough, what I've done is enough. And I'd say with what I built, yeah, there was definitely moments of self-doubt. I remember with ChillOut as well, when I was building it on a platform. It was Flutterflow. It was like a web development platform. And there'd be times where I'd be like editing it, and it just wouldn't work like at all. I'd be like at the chair, I'd be writing a line and I'd hit run and then it'd come up with like 10 different bugs and I'd be Googling each of the bugs. I'd be on some random Stack Exchange forum trying to see if there was an answer. And eventually I got through it. Like, I think there was definitely a time where I was building it where I was like, I don't think I'll actually finish it. Like, there was a point in time I was like, oh, I'll just have like some roughly working thing and submit that. But I ended up finishing it. And that was a huge, huge thing for me. That was a big personal goal I set for myself. So there were definitely moments of struggle. And we live in a world where often we don't show that enough, or at least we've built a digital world where that's not really shown. So trying not to let that affect you is really important.
Insightful, Akash. Before we move towards the conclusion, we would love to get to know you a little more through a fun, quick, rapid round, where you just have to answer in like the shortest way as you can. So just be as quick as you can. Okay. Whatever comes first, just speak it out. So one thing you do when you feel overwhelmed.
Play piano.
Nice. Public speaking or building projects.
Public speaking.
Nice, as expected, by the way. A topic you can talk about for hours.
AI.
Oh, one misconception people have about ambitious students.
That they have everything sorted and they know what they're doing.
Extrovert or introvert?
Extrovert.
And what do you think that schools should teach more openly?
I think communication, social skills, and actually
Very
maybe
important.
some like finance stuff I think would be really useful.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, a comfort activity after stressful days.
Reading a nice book.
One thing you wish students were less afraid of.
Getting bad results, myself included.
Okay, one piece of advice you wish you heard earlier.
You have the ability to change who you are, and worrying about what other people will think of you will just constrict how far you can go.
Oh, thank you so much, Akash.
Okay. Yeah. So okay, for the last and final question, I want to ask you that a lot of students like today are trying to build a very impressive future very early in life, but like many are also struggling quietly with pressure, confusion, or I think simply the fear of falling behind. And like so, if you could like tell those students, like one thing about growth, success, or maybe self worth, something you genuinely wish like more young people understood earlier, what would it be like?
Yeah, I think there's a point to be made about you don't have to like completely resume stack yourself and have this sense of I need to do everything. People almost feel like you basically need to ascend above university level before you start uni, right? You know, write this research paper, like publish in here, build an app, you know, win this award. And there is a component because obviously university admissions is competitive. And like I know Australia and I think India to some extent is more academic test score focused, but places like the US and UK look at more holistically, which drives students to then do these different things. And I think the things that have the biggest impact, the things that like matter the most is when you do it for a community you care about, as opposed to I've got to do it because I need to stack a resume, because people can see through what's genuine and what's not. I mean, you just look at the number of projects, the number of communities that are built, and then they get into uni and then they just disappear, right? So it's very easy to see. And then you wonder, well, what was the impact they really had? Was it like what they said, or is it something that can get them into the next stage? And so for me, I had never planned on studying outside of Australia actually until I later got accepted into the prize program. So that meant, thankfully, like the stuff I was building wasn't actually because I had to, because Australian university admissions are purely based on test scores. I was just doing it because I liked to. That was something I enjoyed. At the time, I hadn't even thought I would be able to use it for anything, right? And so, if you're feeling that pressure of, oh, I have to build all these different things, understand that it's more about building yourself, right? Because you may not necessarily get into that top university you were hoping for without all that stacking, but you might get into one that's pretty solid. But more importantly, you've spent these years working on yourself, and university is only a 4-year degree, but working on yourself, that's something that will help you for decades, right? So you don't have to feel this necessary pressure that I have to have all these things ticked. It's more in your mind being like, you know, have I spent these maybe 16, 17 years growing? Do I think I'm a better person than I was 5 years ago? And that's something that people are going to appreciate a lot more beyond the scope of what university has, right? University itself is changing so much in a world where the value of knowledge work and AI is like kind of going to change the job market in a lot of areas. So people skills become increasingly important. So if you're a person who's actually spent that time working on themselves, how they're able to talk with others, interact and empathize, sure, that may not stack your resume, sure, that may not get you into that dream school, but I think you'll be a much better person off it.
So I just have one last question for you, and then we'll move towards the conclusion. But like we've talked a lot about your journey, we just want to understand like what are you currently working on, which research or projects you are currently developing, or what are your plans for the immediate future?
Yeah. So I'm in my last year of school now. The Australian school system is very interesting in that it's January to December. So I actually graduate at the end of this year. Um, so I don't have much school left at all. So I'm just right now, I think, focusing on trying to enjoy the last 6 months of school. I've been probably spending a lot of time studying for my final exams, um, with a decent amount of stress, but I'm learning to enjoy the little moments as well with, things like these, they inspire me, they give me energy, and there's something that I can enjoy outside of this grind of academics. Beyond that, I think one of the things I most recently worked on was, my hair's quite short, as you can see. So I actually shaved my head like a few months back for the Leukemia Foundation, where I helped my school community raise over $150,000 for blood cancer in Australia, which was the highest raised by a public school, which I was really happy with. And it was something that me and my friends, so many of us together, could just shave our heads and, donate money and raise funds towards something that's a really good cause and something that can help a lot of lives. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. That's actually really, really inspiring and something that we've only heard about in like articles or something. But to see someone who's actually taken up an initiative to do that, it's really inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been
uh,
great.
Thank you so much, Akash, for being part of this conversation and for being so open and honest about your journey. And I am very, very sure a lot of students listening to this will see a part of themselves in your story and will walk away feeling that opportunities and impact do not like just begin with having everything figured out, but by just taking the first step, which is so crucial to achieve anything. So, at the end, is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with that we have not touched upon yet?
I think the last sort of message I'd leave is you have the capacity to define who you want to be and the way other people see you. So never let the world, it's hard at this stage with school and everything and, jobs, futures, but never let the world, your communities, or the societal structure or the education system ever constrict you. Think of what you really want in life and go for it.
Thank you for listening to this conversation.
We hope this left you with fresh questions, new perspective, and something to reflect on.
If this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who might enjoy it too.
Thank you.